we have to re-emphasize to keep things as simple as possible that anything that's illegal is fiction. It has nothing to do with fact or truth. It may use elements of fact in order to basically energize a fictitious title because it just wouldn't work on its own. It needs something to be induced into it to operate it. So when we talk about legal fiction, we're also talking when we're talking about title or would it be names. The book of Peter spoke about it as fabled genealogies. They're not real. These legal surnames, these legal titles. And I know we have received emails from people very bothered by it because they think that we're just stressing too much on this. But they're not reading scripture because their eyes are still blinded. There have been moments in the in the King James which has a legal twist to it. They have put words in there that are not accurate, though you can find out through the research of the Greek word. And the fact that they chose a certain word, removed the word slave where servant should have been, is a deliberate attempt to lead someone down the hireling direction, because servant is not the same as a slave, even though they can share the same meaning for a moment. So we've got to be careful that even though surname does show up in scripture, Simon's surname Peter, that's not accurate. Most, I would say, most translations that I would go to, based on comparison, will usually use the word also called, but not meaning that they were surname. Surname has a specific definition to it and where it leads. So the fact that they would say that a surname is over and above the Christian name, which means superior to, in a legal sense, that's blasphemy. So there would be no reason that Christ would legally surname one of his apostles. He would not give them a civil title because he was not part of the civil world. He was not of that. So he wouldn't be using terminology such as that. So we have to just like slow it down for a moment and realize that the system we're dealing with is dealing on hearsay. Nobody has, to my knowledge, anybody I've ever run into, a real clear first usage of a legal surname. Even if they're tracing through legal ancestry sites, they really don't know. There are many people who have been adopted with these names. We've just taken them on by assumption, which we do anyways. An assumption is deceit because you have nothing that really says you have authority over it. So it's not like you have paperwork that actually can prove it. It's just basically an allegation right off the top. And because a child shows up and they say, well, the parents are going to fill something in and put it in there, and then someone's going to eventually register this and put it into a filing system, does not mean that it's true. That's why they don't guarantee the contents of the documents or authenticate them. You can't legalize truth with fiction. That's another barrier that prevents this from going into a situation that you're actually legalized. Legalized is actually like an authentication, and you can't legalize something that is not the same. You can't put a given name, which is fact, and then legalize it into a fiction and say that that's true. So therefore what we do is we assume these titles, we endorse them, and therefore it requires you to verify something, and therefore you're affirming. When we look at hearsay in its simplest sense, it requires somebody to basically walk in and confirm it, affirm it, and make it accurate. So therefore the burden of proof is no longer upon the accuser, because if you verified the accusation, which would be this legal title that you have no verification is yours to use, it runs into a problem. So just because there's a mere claim in a registration, which is a hearsay document, that's all this is, just someone framing and accusing. The parents didn't know. They didn't know any better because they did it too, and their parents did it to them. So it's just, a simple situation. So we're gonna let this video end at that point, and we're gonna do a video that would just give you an understanding of how the legal system looks at hearsay, and I'm going to give you a court scenario to get you to understand this, which would correspond quite accurately to the video that we talked about, Beyond a Reasonable Doubt, by Jake Ehrlich in the Johnny Carson 1964 show. So anyways, we'll go to the next video, and hopefully this one's helped you to kind of begin to understand that it requires you to endorse it for it to work.